And I will, thank you, Will. I will call the meeting to order. And I'll kind of do a roll call here since there's so many of us. It's easier if I look at who the participants are and then I can just say, this is who's here, sort of thing. Per the governor's extended proclamation 2028 and in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Jefferson County PUD is no longer providing an in-person room for meetings of the BOC. All meetings will be held remotely via Zoom until otherwise informed by the governor. Participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. If you are calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. So with that, I'll move on to introductions. And I'm basically going to do this like a roll call as I see them here. I see Dan Taylor, Commissioner Collins, Rod Rodwin.
Correct.
Seb Eggert. We have Cammie Brown here. Bob McCauley. Craig Durgan. Commissioner Tupper. Don McDaniel. Commissioner Randall.
Hello.
General Manager Kevin Street. And I'm seeing that we do have some members of the public here. I also see we have Rick Johnson, and it looks like staff. We have Samantha Harper, and I also see we have Tom Engel. And it looks like we've got 2 members of the public. Is there anybody here besides the public that whose name I did not call?
This is Jeff Randall. I just wanted to say that I did text Kellen Lynch before the meeting, and he is on kind of an out-of-state bike trip and was unable to join, but said he might possibly send in a comment.
He did send in a comment, and I got a picture of him this morning on my cell phone with my nephew who has a bicycle shop in Monterey. So that was kind of fun. All righty. Moving along, those were the introductions. I will look to have an approval of the agenda. Is there anyone who wants to make any changes to the agenda? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written.
I wanted to make a comment, Jessica.
Who's speaking?
This is Rick Rupp.
Okay, Rick, typically the public comment doesn't come until after the agenda is approved. Does this have something to do with our agenda?
I can't tell from the agenda. There's not a lot of description on what the discussion is going to be about.
Typically, the agenda is just really kind of a skeleton outline.
Well, if my comment's not in the agenda, I'll make a public comment when it's appropriate then.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Okay, I'm still waiting for a motion to approve the agenda or any changes to the agenda.
Bob McCauley, yes.
Bob? Okay, was that a motion to approve the agenda?
Correct.
Thank you. Bob McCauley made a motion to approve the agenda as written. Do I have a second?
Oh, yeah. There you go. Dan's got it.
Dan Taylor seconded?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve the agenda and a second. All those in favor of approving the agenda as written, please say aye or raise your hand. Or...
Aye.
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 Okay, I'm seeing Tom Engel raised his hand and Rick Johnson. And I can only see like 4 people on my screen at a time.
Aye. You might check gallery view, Jessica. You can click on
I-
that, you'll see everybody.
Well, I've got the, I've got it on my gallery view. This is a small screen.
Um,
So I think I think I'm just gonna have to do a call on this. So Bob McCauley made the motion, Dan Taylor seconded. So Craig Durgan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Dan Taylor,
Aye.
Seb Eggert,
Aye.
Bob McCauley, Rod Rodwin,
Aye.
Tom Engel,
Tom is muted.
Aye.
Probably get.
Rick Johnson,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Did I miss anybody? Okay, so it's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, public comment. This public comment period of up to 15 minutes is for any items not on the agenda. During the meeting, the chair may also permit public comments on other discussion items. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Okay, do we have any public comment? And I see Rick Rupp, you have your hand raised. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Yes, my comment about the agenda was there's a letter from Tom Engel that was sent about 3 months ago and has to do with the cab. And I'm just asking whether or not that is going to be discussed sometime later in the agenda.
Okay, I think the extent of that letter would not fall into the business that we're trying to address today, which is a larger overview of the cab and different topics, items that the cab would be studying. I anticipate doing something with that possibly in a future Board of Commissioners meeting after the cab has had the opportunity to study that topic.
Tom, were you going to say something on that subject?
I must say that I disagree with this. I thought that the intent of this meeting, one of the intents of the meeting was for the CAB members to suggest topics which could be jointly agreed upon by the BOC and the CAB. And if so, I think that's certainly a pertinent issue.
Okay, Tom, well, I agree with you that I do think this is a pertinent issue. I just think that this meeting isn't the place to discuss it at length, but to discuss to have a discussion about the board and the CAB coming to a conclusion that this is something that we need to study.
I'm afraid
Yes,
I don't understand this. You say it's not an occasion to discuss it at length, which means, of course, we're not going to discuss the issue at all. But I think 5 minutes to essentially present an issue and say, is this worthy of the board's approval, I think is entirely appropriate.
Okay, well, when we get to that discussion period, let's see what kind of time that we have. And at that point too, the meeting will be chaired by Commissioner Collins. And so that will, he'll be making a decision on that. But in the interest of moving the meeting along so we can get to those discussions, I would like to just go on forward with this. And unless there's any other public comment, I would like to go ahead and move the meeting forward so we can get to that important stuff that we want to talk about.
Jessica, I'd like to continue on that subject. I've had a conversation with one of the commissioners about this meeting and about discussing that letter of Tom Ingles. That's, if I need to go any further, I'd like to ask Jeff for his comments on that.
Okay, what I would like to do right now, the public comment isn't necessarily a back and forth, and I have allowed this to an extent, but I really need to, it's incumbent upon me presiding over this meeting to move the meeting forward. So I'm going to close the public comment right now, not seeing any, well, okay,
This
I
is
see Jeff.
bogus.
Jeff,
Hi, Jessica. I just wanted to say, I think, I've spoken to Rick Rupp about the BPA contract info. I think he's just looking for feedback on, if he can't talk now because it's a topic we're going to talk about during the agenda, that he be given an opportunity to bring up the issue. And I totally hear you that it sounds like our goal is to kind of outline issues of concern that we're hoping to talk about this year with the CAB. So there might need to be a limit on how much time we talk about BPA contract, and presumably give the commissioners a chance to talk about the BPA contract and negotiations, and if that's an appropriate topic for the CAB to talk about. But I think what Rick is looking for is, if he can't talk now, he will be given a chance to talk during the regular meeting.
well, typically, as you know, the public comment is supposed to be for things that aren't going to be covered in the meeting, and we are going to be covering this in the meeting.
So then the answer is he should be able to talk about it once we bring up this topic. Okay.
Correct,
All right.
correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving along, minutes, item 5. This is not to discuss the minutes as far as reading them and approving them, but rather this is to explain a problem that we have with the minutes. We can't get the minutes right now. We cannot open them on our desktops because of, I'm gonna just read this to you really quickly from Rita Hoke. I've been talking to her quite a bit from IT. And she said, the suggestion that they're making is that they'd like, no, but I'm sorry, I got this printed off incorrectly. Basically what's happened is there is a Microsoft glitch, so that when you are getting attachments sent to you in your PUD email, you can't open them. And IT can't do anything about it. They have to wait on Microsoft to fix this. So the workaround is, what you can do is, without trying to open it, just forward the entire email to a tablet, a phone, some other device, or even a different email address. And what I've done for that purpose is I created a second, I have a Gmail account as my personal account, and I've created a second Gmail account. And the only thing that I'm sending there is I'm forwarding these emails so that I can open those documents. I'm not using it to receive or send anything else. So if there's ever a public record request, all those things would just be on that one account. And that's a recommendation that I would make. It works quite well. We're sorry that we're having this problem, and we won't be able to discuss or approve minutes at this meeting. I'm hoping that if everybody gets together and does this workaround, we'll be able to get our minutes, and then we'll have probably 3 months worth of minutes to discuss at our following meeting in March. Does anybody have any questions about that, or suggestions, or any discussion? I'm looking for hands here. Dan Taylor, I see your hand up there.
I think Seb was ahead of me, but I'll just wait. Thank you.
No, I was ahead of you, and then Jessica answered my question. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Dan, you want to get up again?
No, I was just gonna say I'll wait till it gets fixed. I don't think it's that big a deal.
Well, you won't be able to see the minutes. So when we discuss the minutes at the meeting to approve them, you would not have seen them.
I'll just wait. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Collins.
Yeah, suggestion. I wonder if the minutes can just be copied and pasted into the body of the email rather than as an attachment, and that way be accessible to people.
That's an excellent suggestion. Cami, is that doable?
Yes, I can do that. But the formatting will be all off.
It would be really hard to, this is Will, I'm just
Yeah.
interjecting. It would be really hard to review the minutes that way. What we can do, and I'm not sure why it hasn't been coordinated, I think just because we're out of practice. We can fit them into the agenda packet and then you'd all be able to view them easily. So I'll just make a renewed effort to make that coordination so you have them to review that way.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate that. That sounds like a solution. Tom Engel.
Well, I was going to say, since we can't approve the meetings, improve the minutes, and since we've got some important topics to discuss later, if we couldn't just terminate this discussion at this point.
I think we were right there. We were just discussing solutions. Okay, is there any more discussion on this? Then let's move on. Next up, Commissioner Collins, Board of Commissioners update.
Thank you, Jessica. First, I want to ascertain that we have a quorum of the Board of Commissioners. So I am Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2, and Chair of the Board.
Jeff Randall, Commissioner, District 1.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
So we have a quorum. So I'm very, very happy that we are at long last doing a joint meeting of the Board of Commissioners and the Citizen Advisory Board. We are, as you may or may not know, the only public utility district to have this sort of citizen advisory board to facilitate input from the public to the Board of Commissioners. There is one other PUD that has a board that comments on rate increases, but that's it. So we are effectively unique in this respect. And in my 7 years as a commissioner, I have, and we began, Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe when we started being an electric utility was about the time that the Citizen Advisory Board was instituted. So it's been there throughout my entire experience and has provided invaluable input on a variety of issues. And as you may or may not know, because of the Open Public Meetings Act, any two commissioners cannot confer and work together on a particular project without it being an open meeting. So having the Citizen Advisory Board available to do research, and at times with the involvement of one commissioner on a particular project, a lot of the times without commissioner input, to move forward various initiatives. And this has been an enormous help to the PUD, and I expect it will continue to be going forward. We've got a couple of initiatives that are finally reaching fruition and I'm speaking in particular of our being able to finally move forward after a lot of discussion, valuable discussion on the need for meter replacement. We're moving forward on that. And after a number of years of initially very slowly gathering momentum, but then it building dramatically, we are charging ahead, well, pun intended, we are charging ahead on broadband. And with the work of staff, we have been able, again, rather uniquely among PUDs, to obtain substantial grant funding and to address some of the long-standing problems with internet access throughout Jefferson County. So this also is, it's very exciting, it's new territory, and I'm sure that there will be opportunity for the Citizen Advisory Board to assist in our efforts to move forward on this. So that is my report, and I'll now ask Kevin Street to provide the general manager's report.
So I'm going to start out with the meeting I had before this one. It was with the State Emergency Management Office and all the other utility sectors, electric, gas. There's a real threat for cybersecurity, not only to the state of Washington, but to the United States. They believe within the next day or two, actually, they believe it's actually been going on right now, that there's a lot of cyber attacks geared towards utilities, SCADA systems, billing systems, all utilities as a whole, whether it be water, gas, electric, some things are being put in place now so that we can all work together. It's rare. The state calls these meetings. It was called yesterday at 1 for a meeting today at 1:30. So, you know, take it for what it's worth, but there's a lot of issues out there. Our system's small, but in the cyber world, small systems are hit sometimes at a greater frequency than large systems because of ransom. You know, we'll pay, and our data is just as important as anybody else's. So we have been working for a long time on some cybersecurity and some infrastructure changes that we're making and moving forward with the board. And like I say, this is not just Jefferson County. This is throughout the country that these attacks are being made. So I'll end there with that one. And then this talk a little bit about some of the outages our crews worked through. The first outage, the bigger outage in November, did get federal funding. So we're hopefully to move forward on approximately $400,000 on that outage. We're still waiting for the second and third outage. We have over $1 million out for repair work. And as they work through the state and the federal levels, we'll keep everyone up to date. But it'd be nice to, our hope is to at least replenish our coffers to about $1 million for outages. State does 75%, and then, or the federals do 75%, and then the state does 12.5%. The state has not declared for the first outage, but the federals has. So we're moving forward on those fronts. We're pretty sure the second outage, the bigger of the three, will be at least the federal government will reimburse us for our losses during that time. So any questions? That's my, oh,
Yeah. Kevin, I don't know if this is really the right venue for all of this, but I do have some questions about, you mentioned cybersecurity. So we've seen this come up. I'm glad you're on top of it. What are your assurances from the smart meter company that they can keep a firewall between our system and anybody that wants to hack into it? Or is that something that's dependent on the customer interfacing with our system and being the keyhole into which they penetrate our system? Do you know anything about that? And how can we protect ourselves?
I think I understand your question, Seb. On the meters, will do a push into our network so that it would be extremely difficult for somebody to get two-way communication. You need a two-way communication with the network. So far, at least with the meter manufacturers, there hasn't been a cybersecurity issue with the meter reading data because of the information itself that's getting passed. This is a topic on how we have to segregate out not only the metering, the SCADA, and all those issues have to have electronic fences. And so we're moving forward. We think we have plans to do what we need to on as far as the meter goes. It's much easier to secure that data than other data, though.
Yeah, and then of course, what we're talking about is just standard residential. If you're talking about a time of use metering, does that increase our risk of somebody getting in the back door?
No, sir, it doesn't.
Okay.
It's basically just more reads.
And you had mentioned how, well, I guess Ken really mentioned how wonderful it was we're getting some funding to put in fiber. Are we still at sort of a mission critical decision point in far as the subscription rate of people that would use that service and whether or not it can actually be something that pays for itself? Or are we still kind of on the hook for whatever sort of matching funds we have to come up with to get those grants? I'm not sure that anybody's explained that recently, and I may be behind the curve on that one. But if you got a moment, it'd be nice to know if I mean, it sounds wonderful, and I'm all for it. I think it's terrific, but if it puts the ratepayer owners at risk of having to cover some sort of a financial loss for some period of time until it really does pay for itself, I'd like to know that up front so that I can represent to the people that asked me about this what the reality is about that. And maybe Ken could answer too. I just don't know. It's up to you guys.
I can go, Ken, or you can, doesn't matter to me.
Well, I expect, the biggest part of broadband expansion is the cost of the build out. And having employed a highly experienced consultant to work with us and looking at the business plan, you're a businessman yourself, and when you first start a business off, there's a bit of time before it is capable of paying for itself, and we anticipate that.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly how long that will be remains to be seen. But we're pricing the product very competitively, and we are looking at areas where, fortunately, we have grant money to cover both outlying areas of Jefferson County, which are unserved for all intents and purposes,
Mm-hmm.
but also to address areas that have a higher population density, such as Cape George and Marrowstone Island, where we can expect a high subscription rate and a much quicker return on our investment.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, do you want to add to that?
I'm just going to emphasize that the bulk of the money For example, our latest grant, the county put in 750,000. The state's given us approximately 9,500 or 9.5 million. And then the PUD is going to have to contribute some unless we can find some additional funds up to 950,000. So basically 90% of this construction work is being paid for by others. And these are areas that people don't have internet. Through our early outreach to them, we feel we will easily exceed 60% take rate. So we're very comfortable. These areas, because they are not served or underserved, lend itself very well to a higher take rate.
Okay, well, that's reassuring, and thank you. I have other questions, but I'll let them go for now. Thank you.
Craig Durgan, you have your hand up.
Yes, I wrote about the issue of internet security back when we were looking at these meters, and the only real way that you can guarantee not to have an issue is not to be hooked up to the internet. And this is a really important thing. I don't know if you remember a while back, but it's hard to say if it was us or the Israelis, but they were able to hack into the Iranian centrifuges and overspeed them. So we really got to look at this strongly. And like I said, the best way to not get hacked is have no connection to the internet. As far as broadband, I certainly hope you don't put the ratepayers into a big debt situation. We were told when we bought the electrical power system that it was going to be about 40 million. That ballooned up over 100 million. That's it on my comments. Thank you.
I will mention, Craig, on the meter system, it will be a closed system. It will not run over the internet. It'll be on PUD-owned fiber or through a system that does not connect to the internet. So that does help on security.
So Jessica, I think I should turn over the chair to you to continue with cab business.
Thank you. I will take that baton. Have I unmuted myself?
We can hear you.
Okay, apparently I did. You couldn't answer the question otherwise, could you? Okay, well, with cab business, and thank you, gentlemen, for your reports and your responses to the questions and comments. We have two new cab members, Rick Rodwin and Rick Johnson, and it's Rodwin. I morphed your names together. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I just want to give this as a formal welcome to the cab. And Rod, I'll start with you. Would you introduce yourself to us a little bit, please?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. My name's Rod Rodwin. I am a semi-retired technology and public security, or security and public utility consultant, born in Seattle, raised in Port Townsend, married a Port Townsend girl, graduated from Port Townsend High School, moved off to Bellevue to work for the phone company over there for 25 years. Worked there for 25 years, doing a lot of different things, but from outside plant technician to lineman to crew manager to outside plant engineer. I left the phone company after 25 years. They decided to centralize all their engineering resources to Denver, and I didn't want to do that. So I went to work for a private consulting firm in Kirkland. Their biggest client was Microsoft. So I spent the next 7 years working at Microsoft in Microsoft facilities as they built campuses and buildings and data centers and all of that. Did a huge amount of design work there. After that, in 2005, I started Rodman Consulting Group. I've been working for myself for the past 20 plus years. I deal with public utility systems, acquisition for developers, for large property owners, mall owners. Most of my clients now are building large MDUs over in the Seattle area, or are converting malls to residential. Owning a mall isn't necessarily a good piece of business right now. So I've been doing that. I have, while I am semi-retired, I still have about 10 projects in various stages of starting or completing or whatever. So wife and I have been married for 52 years. We moved back up here when she decided to retire about 5 years ago. So I'm a consultant. I can work from anywhere. So we moved to Port Townsend. We live out in Island View, south of Cala Point. I have two boys, 2 sons, and 5 grandsons. Basically, between them and consulting and taking care of houses and everything else, keeps me busy. So thought I would take on something else.
Of course. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Rick?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Rick Johnson. I grew up in the Maple Valley, Hobart, Black Diamond area of King County. Spent in '74, I took a job on a line clearance tree trimming crew. In '76, I got a lineman's apprenticeship in outside line construction. Topped out in 1980, traveled through the Northwest and areas, building power lines. And in the late 80s, I took a job with IBW 77 as a business rep for outside line construction and tree trimmers. In early 90s, I took a job with Puget Sound Energy and worked in the King County area. Let's see. In the mid 90s, I got hired by the local 77 as a union organizer and did that for a while. I returned to Puget in the late 90s, took a job. Well, Puget downsized and contracted out all their crews, and I got a serviceman lineman's bid here in Port Townsend, which my mother grew up here and I'd heard talked about my whole life. And the phone's ringing and ringing in the background, but I'll just keep talking. It'll stop, hopefully. I got a serviceman's bid here in Port Townsend, and I loved the job. I also got elected to the executive board of 77 and then ultimately became the president of Local 77. Due to health reasons, I retired from Puget and approximately at the same time the PUD took over, a little before, and served as a vice president of Washington State Labor Council for a while and president of Local 77. I had a position on the Governor's Industrial Safety and Health Advisory Board for a while. I did 6 years on the Washington State Arts Commission. I should say I'm a stone carver and involved in the Northwest Stone Sculptors Association, on the board of that. And since I retired as president 2 years ago at 77, I promised my wife I wouldn't take anything on for a while, and that sentence is up. Now I can fill my life up with meetings that I didn't know I missed so much.
Thank you so much. And what a perfect time to attend your first meeting since you told your wife that Valentine's Day. How about that? Huh?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much.
And welcome to both of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome. Love Rod's background.
I want to, at this point, also thank Bob McCauley. He informed me that this will be his last meeting. And it was unfortunate that at the time that Bob came on was right about the time that COVID hit. And we sort of went almost dormant. And we're not really able to utilize his many skills to help the CAB and the Board of Commissioners. But his participation in our meetings and his comments, I think were very valuable. And I just want to thank you very much, Bob, for volunteering these past few years. It's much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Jessica, and hope I'll stay in touch with Commissioner Tupper, at least through our Gardener Coffee Club, and if I can be of assistance, I will do.
Thank you so much. It's appreciated. Moving on, I think I need to hand the
Jessica?
baton. Yes.
Yes,
I'm
Commissioner
sorry?
Tupper.
Yes.
It's Commissioner Tupper. So
Yes.
I'll try my video here. Hopefully I don't lose my connection. So first I want to thank Bob for his service, and yeah, I'll keep in touch with you, Bob. I also want to say welcome to the new CAB members as well. And I wanted to bring it up real quick because I'm going to have this opening. I've had 3 people contact me already. I've been in contact with, and they're going to send in resumes. I know we have a deadline at the end of the week for the ad that we put out, but I just want to bring it to the other 2 commissioners' attention. There was an email that came out earlier by staff today that one of the applicants from the Brennan area isn't quote unquote a customer. I don't think that's one of the prerequisites. They just need to be a resident of the district. So I just want to clarify. We have water systems down there. Ultimately, I assume we're going to have a broadband presence down there in some way, shape, or form. So I just want to make sure there's no issues with that candidate amongst the other 2 commissioners. Are we all on board with that before anything progresses any further, that that person would be eligible?
Commissioner Randall?
Unless Dawn or someone else can explain if there's any, I don't believe there's any requirement that somebody be a customer. I presume they need to live in our county. And since Brennan is in our service area for non-electrical issues, I would think they would qualify unless somebody else can bring up something that says they don't.
If they do qualify, snag them.
Yeah, and again, like I said, we already have water presence. We likely have some broadband presence there, and we collect property tax. I'm assuming the people in Brennan are paying property tax. So you're eligible to run for my position or a county commissioner position just by living in the county. I think that's the, living in the service areas, that's the threshold we're going to hold to. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with that as the applications move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we are all on the same page. I'm not aware of any reason why they couldn't serve.
Okay, thank you. As I was going to say, I think at this point, I need to hand the baton back to you, Commissioner Collins, because this will be the discussion that we've all been wanting to have. And I think we should hear from the commissioners first, actually, what they see the role of the CAB being, and discussing possible future projects. And of course, the CAB members are going to want to participate in this, because the reason we're all here together is so we can have these discussions about what items you would like for us to cover and what items we would perhaps like to study. And I'm sure we're going to get some dovetailing there. So with that, I'm going to hand this back to you.
Okay. So I'd like to hear first from both of my fellow commissioners. Commissioner Randall.
I'll go first. So a couple things that I have thought of, and I was at one of the recent CAB meetings, and I think I brought these up, but I think an area where the CAB can really be helpful is with issues that affect our customers. And 2 issues that I can think of that will affect our customers include the the program that we're getting RUS funding for to provide, we've called it on-bill financing. That's technically not really what it is, but basically customers being able to borrow money from this fund for energy efficiency and other improvements and then paying it back over time. And I know we have kind of a laundry list of things that they can apply for, but I was thinking that might be a program that once we're getting close to rolling it out or have more details on it, that perhaps it could be presented to the CAB and the CAB given an opportunity to hear how we plan on making it work, hear how we want to communicate about it, hear what the customer side of the interaction will be like. That I think the CAB's input would be really valuable just as themselves being customers to help that rollout be as smooth as possible. And then the other one is kind of similar. It's the whole broadband thing. And we've been working so hard in getting broadband money and identifying areas to string fiber. But I don't know that there's been a lot of talk about how, again, we communicate to the customer, what the customer experience will be like once we have fiber to their home or business. How will options be presented to them about the type of service? How will the billing work? I think all those questions, the CAB might help us flesh through just again to make the rollout as smooth as possible. So those are two areas. And then I know Rick Rupp and Tom Engel have brought up the BPA contract issues. And when we get to that topic, I'm kind of interested to hear what we think of as the true schedule. And I actually looked up one of the letters that Tom emailed us, and it had BPA referring to some sort of deadline in March of 2022 for getting feedback on things. So I think it is timely for us to talk about that one a little bit today, even if we just talk about it in terms of what's the timeline framework for us having discussions on the BPA contract. And I don't know if the CAB is the best place to talk about it, but I think we all need to be a little more up to speed on what the boundaries and the big issues with that BPA contract will be and what the timelines will be. But my first ideas are kind of the customer experience and helping us design those two new programs, the broadband and the on-bill financing renewable or energy saving loan program.
Thank you. Commissioner Tupper.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, Jeff kind of hit on one of the ones that I had at the top, and that's the messaging and the communications, whether, even on rates, the things that we're doing on like the sewer rates and water rates and things like that. Again, messaging and communication might be a place, to get that synergy going with the CAB out into the community, just like JBAT's going to do with the broadband issues. And in relationship to, I'm agnostic to the different things the CAB could or may take up at this point. I don't know, where we're headed on a lot of things myself. Even as commissioners, we're still not sure what the path looks like in certain areas. And the contract is a few years out, but it goes very fast. And Jeff referenced BPA, and that was on the EIM entrance. They're doing a white paper, and that's pretty much already a done deal as to what's going to go into the priorities for public utilities going into the energy imbalance market. And that got pushed out till May. I don't know if they're still taking comments between now and March or not, or after March, I should say. So, and I also don't want to see us stifling or, trying to box in any particular issues. I want transparency. So to Mr. Rupp and Tom's points, I think there's discussions we should and can have there on the topics that they've brought up. The couple things I will reiterate that I've reiterated in the past, since we have a couple new members on already, is how the CAB will function in the fact of whatever they get from us, we'll try and keep it very specific, and so that it doesn't get to be too nebulous of a large issue for the CAB to go off in a bunch of different directions. I think they should probably keep that in mind, that the board's going to look for probably a little bit more narrow directional type of issues to be taken up. And I would like to see personally, again, this is as a commissioner, it's not in the bylaws, that we get balance on subcommittees, that each district has a representative be able to be on a subcommittee, something I've pushed for in the past. And any issue that the subcommittees do take up, that there be a minority report if that's possible. I know some things are slam dunks, but I would always like to see, it's kind of like my teacher used to say, show me your work. It's like, okay, I don't like these preconceived, pre-baked cakes that we already know what the outcome is, and we're just going to try and justify it. I'd rather see we were objective and we looked at all the components that go into whatever it is the CAB takes up or is tasked with. That was a lot. Staff time is another one. I don't know if Kevin's going to weigh in. That's always been something in the past, is how much help or time does the CAB need from staff? That's always been an issue. We probably should touch on that. Dawn obviously works for continuity between the board and the manager and the CAB. So those are a couple of things I would live with new people, a lot more new people on. We should kind of keep those things in mind. So with that, I'll stop right there for the moment.
Thank you, Commissioner Tupper. I've given a little bit of thought also to potential areas that the CAB can focus on, but I want to preface my remarks by saying I think it's important that we allow the CAB or encourage the CAB to come up with some of its own ideas and initiatives. I think that that probably warrants revisiting the way the rules of governance have been written. But I think it's tremendously important that the CAB feel empowered to come up with recommendations for areas of study and be able to, on their own initiative, begin, if not a deep dive, at least a shallow dive into certain areas and make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. That being said, I think it is probably timely that we revisit the assistance being provided to low-income people in the community. I think that that needs to be examined and some recommendations put forward to the Board of Commissioners. With respect to broadband, the grants that we have been able to successfully compete for require there being community support, and that's a function that the Jefferson Broadband Action Team has fulfilled. Where I think that there is a need is for there to be coordination, which had existed in the past due to joint membership of CAB members and JBAT members, but I think we need to look at how the Citizen Advisory Board coordinates with the Jefferson Broadband Action Team, look for areas of synergy and cooperation and improved communication. So the last thing I would mention as an area of study, and this I think anticipates some of the discussion about Bonneville Power Administration, and that is that as an individual in a small PUD, our ability to come up with alternatives in terms of energy sourcing is extremely limited. But the idea of there being a regional purchasing organization, I think, where we would join with not only other PUDs, but cooperatives among the Northwest states, that I think has some real possibility because the numbers there are quite large, and that actually might be a viable option. And I think that looking at where that exists in other parts of the country and how well it operates is an area of study that I think should draw our attention. So that's what has been on my mind in terms of the kind of things that potentially could be looked at by the Citizen Advisory Board. And having said that, I'd like to open up a discussion to all of the various CAB members and see what your ideas are. And the first hand I saw was Tom Engel.
Well, thank you, Ken. I would like to bring up as a possible, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your comments, which indicated a willingness to have the CAB dive into some topics of its own and not necessarily wait for a go-ahead from the commissioners and the manager, which unless I misunderstand it, is what the current situation is. So let me give a brief outline of which is contained also in a letter which I sent to the commissioners and also to the CAB members. So our PUD buys all its electricity from the BPA at a projected cost of $15 million for 2022. Our current contract with the BPA expires in 2028, which seems a long way off, but the BPA wants its customers to sign new contracts in 2023, which is just next year. Several public agencies representing co-ops and utilities have petitioned the BPA to allow customers to caucus and formulate requests that they would like to see integrated into the post-2028 contract. In my view, and I'll say not me just as an individual, I'm speaking in this for Rick Rupp and Bill County and Phil Lusk, who and the four of us have been discussing as a group for some time BPA issues. We think it's important for the PUD to be actively involved in the process, the caucus process, which could lead to more favorable contract conditions than at present. And we all believe that the CAB could provide a vital role in researching the topic of the future contract with the BOC. Now, the BPA is a nonprofit federal power marketing administration. It is not a generating organization. The dams themselves are operated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation. And the way to think of the BPA is a wholesaler who is marketing the electrical power from 31 federal hydroelectric projects in the Northwest, one non-federal nuclear plant, and several small non-federal power plants. Now, the BPA, so basically, I think there are a number of issues that we should, that warrant some discussion about the future contract. And I'll just talk very briefly about each of these. First of all, the BPA is not accountable to any oversight body that determines if its actions are in the best interests of its missions and customers. So a question for our PUD is, how can we determine that BPA actions are in our best interests? Now, I want to make clear at the outset that I'm not advocating, or none of us are advocating, that the PUD not consider BPA as the provider for electricity beginning in 2028. I don't think there's a viable alternative. The crucial issue is, under what terms would we buy electricity for them? So the nature of previous BPA contracts with its customers, and there are 148 customers, are unlike normal business contracts. In the recent past, customers agreed to 20-year contracts with no escape clause and without any rate guarantees. In other words, you're writing a blank check. The customers agree to pay whatever costs BPA incurs in providing electricity without any input on their expenditures. So the question is, should the PUD agree to similar terms in a new contract? And I would say that I've seen correspondence from the Public Power Council, which raises a very similar point. The BPA is bound by statute to recover all its costs from its customers. If any customer severs its relationship with the BPA, the other customers must pay more. This opens the possibility of a death spiral for the BPA and the remaining customers. So again, should the PUD agree to a future contract without an exit opportunity? The BPA does not make public the costs of generation of the 31 generating facilities individually. It only wants to talk about all of them as one unit. But these units are very diverse. The Grand Coulee generating station has a capacity of 7,000 megawatts, whereas the Boise River Diversion generating station has a capacity of 3 megawatts. Nearly half of the 31 projects in total provide only 1.5% of the maximum capacity of the system. So I think a valid question is, what percentage of BPA's expenses are associated with these small projects? Should generation from these projects be terminated? And here I would say that I've also corresponded with the Public Power Council, and Michael Dean has told me that he thinks this is a very valid consideration, that they have already petitioned the BPA to essentially stop generations on the Willamette River.
Tom, how much more time do you need to finish? Because there are other people.
1 minute.
You got it.
Carbon-free solar and wind generation is expected to increase dramatically in the next decade. Is a long-term contract with the BPA desirable? And finally, in the past, BPA has sold surplus capacity outside of the Northwest at a price below rates for its customers. So at present, Northwest customers are subsidizing buyers of surplus electricity in California. Can this trend be minimized by reducing electricity production? So these are some of the issues which I think the CAB could investigate, and I imagine be useful to the PUD when they participate in these caucuses concerning the future contracts.
Thank you. Jessica?
Thank you. And thank you, Tom. That was well done. Appreciate it. Just a couple of comments that I wanted to make with respect to Commissioner Trooper. And I know you put this out there before about when we have our subcommittees that you would prefer that we would have someone from each district in it. Just for clarification, subcommittees are no more than 3 persons. Sometimes they're 2, sometimes they're even just 1. That has happened. But it's more important, I think, that we have people who are passionate and engaged in what they're studying, rather than feeling as though they need to fill a quota. Because you'll get a lot more done with people who are on a committee because they want to be on the committee, not because they feel like, well, nobody else from my district wants to do it, so I guess I will. So I just wanted to give some clarification on that. One of the things that I think needs some studying is we need to, and I've got it here, we need to get the governance subcommittee active again. We have our operating guidelines, and I certainly don't want to go and try to rewrite them entirely. Russ Michael and Larry Dennison's, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who else was on that subcommittee, but they did spend a lot of time on putting that together. I think it was Gary Rowe. And also the resolution 2018-015, I think needs some looking at. In addition, these documents were put together when we were working with a different management. Well, I don't think we need to change every time we get a new manager, not like that happens all the time, but I do think we need to have something that's more in line with where the cabinet and the Board of Commissioners see that, as opposed to as much oversight as management gave to it at a previous time. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. Dan Taylor?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to express a little agreement with a few things. One, I think it's important that the CAB keep its topics narrowly defined. I think that does a number of things to both limit the length of time it takes and accomplish the goal that it was tasked with accomplishing. And I think that also helps to limit staff time. Second of all, thank you, Tom, for a detailed look at that. That was pretty informative on a number of levels. And I think it's important that we, at some point, talk about leveling that playing field, and I have some ideas about that, but I won't go into those now. That's all I got.
Thank you. Jessica, your hand's back up.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to keep it up there, but Tom, it sounds like you have a volunteer for your committee.
Craig Durgan, I see your hand.
Yeah, regarding the cab, I mean, when I first got on it, I was led to believe it was to be an advisory board for the commissioners, not to become basically to usurp the commissioners. And some of the comments I'm a little concerned about, where you want to just let the cab kind of run loose and do its own thing. I don't really think that's appropriate. And also, as far as committees, they really should be diverse and have someone represent each of the districts on them, rather than possibly becoming just something that's locked into something that Port Townsend wants. It's PUDs countywide, not just one area. Thank you.
Commissioner Tupper.
So, and I probably should have brought this up on 8.1 on the CAB members. Can we get some sort of a matrix on who is in what part of their rotations as CAB members, you know, or in their first year, their last year? That would be a little helpful as well, I think, as we look forward as to how much of a term everybody's getting into here as they're coming onto the CAB, or how much they have left. Dawn or whoever, anyone want to tackle that one?
I can answer that one. I've gone back and I've done some research, and I have put together an outline, and I will have that ready for you at your meeting tomorrow night. I'll get that out. I will email that, and I will email that out all to the CAB members as well.
Thank you.
Don?
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jessica.
You're
Don,
welcome.
did you want to talk?
So maybe one of the things we can do is put together a rough draft list of the subject matters that were discussed today. Maybe Jessica, you and I can work our way through that before it goes out, and get something out to folks, both the commissioners and the CAB members, to see what we've talked about today.
Tom Engel?
Yeah, so I took Don's comment to indicate that we were done with topics, but I have another one, but this will be much shorter.
Oh, no, go, man.
We had in the past a subcommittee on climate change, which never really met, and I would like to suggest that as a future topic for the CAB. And the kind of things that I think they could look into would be, what are the forecasts for the next several decades of sufficient river flow to satisfy demands for carbon-free electricity? The BPA relies heavily on the University of Washington for that, and there are lots of reports available, and we could simply summarize that information and make it available to the BOC. How can the PUD reduce its carbon footprint? And then how can the PUD help Jefferson County to reduce its carbon footprints in the building, heating, transportation, and building sectors in Jefferson County? I mean, I think we're all aware that the mantra is becoming electrify everything as much as possible if you have carbon-free electricity. And it doesn't take a genius to see that this is in the interest, the business interest of the PUD to do so. So how can the PUD be more proactive in the community and the county as a whole in getting people to switch to electricity wherever they can?
Thank you. Jessica?
Yes, something that I wanted to bring up here was on January 13th, 2020, a little over 2 years ago, we had a meeting and we put together this, had a work plan review. And so just as a means of information, the subcommittees that we have had have been on broadband, climate change. There was one here on a credit card. I have no idea. Electric vehicles, governance, low income, meter replacement, noxious weeds, rates, solar, strategic plan, and work plan. And so those are all different ones that we've had before. And I can send this out to everybody. I mean, I'll see what I can do about putting it in the body of the email, because it's just interesting to get a look at it. Some of these are active, some are new, some were suspended, some are inactive, which I think is pretty much the same thing as being suspended. And well, that's not true. Inactive can be you're not working on something right now, but it is a subcommittee that would continue to exist. The suspended ones are there's just no further work unless requested by the Board of Commissioners. And I'll be happy to send that out to everyone as well, so they can kind of see what we've done, and if these are, and if they want to resurrect any of these or reactivate them in any way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Tom, you have your hand up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't take it down.
Any additional comments, any additional suggestions for Citizen Advisory Board projects, areas of inquiry? Tom, your hand is up.
Well, I guess I was hoping that we would get a reaction from the commissioners on the two specific proposals which I put forward, whether they would agree that this seems like a worthwhile thing to do for the CAB.
When we get the minutes from this meeting, I think we can then bring that forward at a Board of Commissioners meeting, look over all of the suggestions and do some prioritization. I don't feel prepared at this moment to render an opinion, not without further thought. I don't know whether my fellow commissioners feel differently about it, but I would be uncomfortable endorsing anything at this point without giving it further consideration. Jessica, your hand is up, and then Rick Rupp, and then Kevin, and then Commissioner Randall.
I had almost forgotten about this, and it would be remiss of me. Kellen Lynch couldn't be here today since he's cycling along the California coast. So, but he did send a comment in, and so I'd like to read that to you now. Thank you for allowing this comment to be submitted in lieu of my virtual presence. My partner and I are cycling along the California coast, and attempting to join a call today would be a challenge. My first comment for this initial strategic planning session is that without a plan for the CAB, I'm not sure the board has much purpose. However, it is clear that there is enough interest among the current CAB that we may pursue meaningful work, especially regarding issues that pertain directly to ratepayers, like expanding low-income assistance on bill financing, support for emergency distributed energy generation, and other energy transition-oriented work. I understand that the PUD is engaged in many critical areas that sit outside of the CAB's skill set, but focusing on our work on these public-facing issues that I've named could provide meaningful support and guidance to our community utility. If we are to be representative of the citizens, we should focus our efforts on policies and projects that explicitly lower the customer's energy burden now and in the future. I'm willing to be part of any such subcommittee that forms for these purposes. Thank you for your consideration. And that's from Kellen Lynch.
Rick Rupp, your hand is up.
Yes, Commissioner Collins, thank you. And I'd like to thank Tom for that discussion about the BPA and the rate provider of choice contracts that are coming up. And I think your comments, Commissioner Collins, about not answering that is was directed to that letter. And Tom's comments about the BPA provider of contract, am I correct there, off base?
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, Rick.
All right, let me back up then and say, Tom basically outlined the letter that was sent to the Board of Commissioners over 2 months ago. And I'm hearing from the commissioners, they're wanting to have the public engaged, want the CAB engaged. And here's a letter coming from one of your own people right there on that committee. And it has not been answered in 2.5 months. And it's has been treated like it didn't exist. And if you're looking for resources within the community, that has to change. This idea of not answering back to the public on items of interest where they want to help and assist in a resource-laden community like Jefferson County. If you cannot connect with those people and use those resources, it's a loss to everyone. And it's very bothersome to me that, and I brought this up at different meetings of the PUD and still just cannot get an answer. It's been in your hands for 2.5 months. What's it take for you to look at a letter and make a decision? Thank you.
General Manager Street.
I'll throw one out that the staff is looking at now, and that's storage. With some of the electrification that's going on with EV chargers, with possible ferries, I believe storage is a common link that could really help out during emergencies and stuff like that. So I'd like storage at least to be talked about. Thank you.
Commissioner Randall.
I just wanted to respond a little bit to Rick and Tom. And we've had questions like this before where we get very specific, long emails and letters from our customers kind of demanding you respond to a question and to be very specific about it. And I think it's important to remember that as coming to any public meeting, you can ask. I can go to the city council and I can ask questions or whatever, and that board is conducting business. They may or may not take up my comment. They'll probably thank me for it. They may not respond exactly like I want to, and that's just the way it is. So you can't really pound on the table. You can pound on the table and say, we need you to respond to this. And I guess my response is the whole BPA thing is a process. And a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, frankly, are very high altitude technical questions that don't have quick, easy answers. But I think as we go through this process and as we digest the information on it, we should be as transparent as we can. We should offer the public chances to share their thoughts and opinions. But the hard part is that we're frankly just a really small fish in this big pond of power. And we have strong opinions and so forth, and we have actually gone to pretty great lengths to try and get as much information as we can by joining WAPAG, which is a much smaller group, much more accessible group than, for example, PPC is. So all I can say is a lot of this, I'm still trying to wrap my head around and understand what our options are. And BPA, their main goal is Rick, or as Tom correctly identifies, is to market the power from the federal system. And in some cases, their hands are tied a little bit, where they're handed these assets and they're said, market the power. And they're looking to us and other utilities to find out, well, how much power do we want? How long do we want it? And that's the part where I think participating in groups like WAPAG, where we can raise issues and concerns. And one of the big issues is length of contract. Do we feel comfortable being tied down for 20 years from 2028 in a period that will have dramatic change from I think a concern that a lot of us are bringing up. And at the most recent WAPAG meeting, I think there was talk about trying to have options where if things got too out of control, there could be off ramps for organizations to get out of contracts if certain things happen. So that's about as far as I can go. And we may not have adequate answers that satisfy you on things because we're involved in a process, but your input is appreciated. Your thoughts are appreciated. And I would like to have it as transparent as possible, but this is high level, complicated stuff, a lot of which is out of our hands and we don't have answers for right now, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't get the best information we can, evaluate options, and seek to have our customers weigh in on the process.
Thank you. Commissioner Tupper.
Dan Taylor was ahead of me. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. I've bargained and written fairly large number of agreements and done that in more than 100 different industries. Contract bargaining at any level is not something that can be done without great strategic planning. And so I don't think it's a problem that it's taken a while for the commissioners to get that set of ducks in a row. It's not an easy thing to do. Bargaining is not an immediate process by any stretch of the imagination. And having been the smaller player in a lot of big negotiations, it's a little bit more difficult to carve out those things that are necessary and or needed by the smaller fish. So you can't entirely rush the process. No one is a more instant gratification nut than I am, but those things take time to produce a proper result, or at least the best result available. So while I don't always agree with different commissioners' stances on things, I have to take their side in this one. That's all I got.
Thank you. Commissioner Tupper, and then General Manager Street.
Yeah, so urgency, that's a topic. It seems like there's some urgency amongst the cab, and I understand that it's been 2 years of kind of treading water. I agree with Commissioner Collins. I don't think right today we necessarily have to set anything in stone. I would like to see my third cab member get installed, and then have those discussions on what the topics are going to be, get your subcommittees in place, that sort of thing. So, that would be the beginning of March. We're only a couple weeks out from having a full cab and everybody kind of knowing the rules, and maybe a few things come into a little better focus between now and then too. I don't know, but I'm gonna push back a little bit on Tom Engel's statements there. And again, this isn't a criticism. This is just, there's different views, there's different informations out there. And on the contract in particular, the timelines I've been seeing and hearing are to sign a contract around 2025. Now, yeah, that's going to get here in a hurry, but not 2023. That was something I heard come out that I'm not sure that was accurate. And yes, the Willamette dams are probably going to be decommissioned from power, but they'll stay in place for other purposes. BPA is answerable to the United States Congress now, so they aren't a completely rogue entity. And they did get some more things out of Congress this year, like a more credit limit, things like that. And people can say that's good or bad. But they are answerable to Congress. And there's other issues that play into this whole thing about where we're going to get our power and how much it's going to cost. The Columbia Fish Accords are up for renewal. We have the Columbia River Treaties starting to get some traction in where, the United States State Department and other entities are getting involved with getting those things. So there are still a lot of moving parts. Other entities that are looking different things, whether it's the 8th power plan, and there's been some pushback on whether the 8th power plan is going to be accurate or not. There's, on both sides of the equation, there's people saying something's not quite right there. So there's still a lot of moving targets in relationship to our BPA contract. And Jeff, I'm going to tag on a little bit of what Jeff said, that in the discussions now, there will be some triggers. I mean, or off ramps, however you want to look at it. Those discussions are being had and being made, and we are a small fish, but we do have the opportunity to weigh in. Now, whether that moves the needle, I don't know. And whether or not the cab is going to bring us any view or any new information that we're already not privy to, I am unsure as well. So I'm not trying to close the door on anything. I'm just saying that this, I forget which commissioner said it, but this is a process. And we're going to have to let it somewhat play out in real time. Urgency isn't going to change our positions. We have to be methodical, and we have to understand all the dynamics that are going into play. So I'll leave it at that. Again, that was a lot in a real short time.
If I may comment, so the purpose of our discussion at this point in time is to identify issues that warrant further study for the Citizen Advisory Board. And I think we've, to use one of Commissioner Tupper's favorite phrases, I think we've wandered fairly far into the weeds on this. And certainly what has been suggested this afternoon will not be forgotten. We will take up these issues. I think they're important. And I appreciate the comments of my fellow commissioners, because having attended significant number of Public Power Council meetings over the years, what impresses me is how tremendously complicated these issues are. Which is not to say that it's not an appropriate topic for the Citizen Advisory Board, because I think it is. But I would like to see us move on. I think it's important to move to the next point on our agenda, the future agenda items and the calendar. And then bring this to a close. So, Tom, I'll recognize you for a minute.
Fine. I would like to point out that the letter suggesting from the BPA, which okayed the idea of a caucus among the customers, was written in November. And I believe, as you stated, Ken, that they said they would move ahead beginning in March of this year. It is now the middle of February. So if you want to cast a vote in an election or in a caucus, you need to be prepared before what, the middle of March. So it is not as though we are talking about an issue that is far off in the future. It is in fact very immediate. And I think that it's well possible that the PUD will have little influence on the outcome, but to not cast your vote or not take it seriously and say, this is what I'd like to see in the contract is very, would not be in our best interest.
Thank you. That's a good point. Jessica?
You know, mine is actually a future agenda item calendar type comment, so I'll just wait.
Okay. Commissioner Tupper?
Yeah, I think we might be conflating things a little bit. The entrance into the EIM is the March deadline that keeps being brought up. The contracts are a much broader and longer scope of process. So maybe there's some urgency with the EIM entry. It got delayed till May, but it's for all intent and purposes, that's happening. The decisions have already been made. So maybe I'm misunderstanding something.
I think you are misunderstanding this. Specifically, the letter from Kim Thompson talks about the proceeding ahead on the next contract with their timetable in March. They're not talking about the EIM.
So I will go back and look at your letter and refresh my memory as I expect my fellow commissioners will also do. Jessica, you have your hand up?
Oh, no, I'm just waiting for the future agenda items. That's why I said, I figured by the time I figured out how to take it down and put it back up again, we'd be adjourned, so.
Okay, well, the future has arrived.
Ah, lucky me. Well, what I wanted to ask the commissioners is for them to put on, I believe their first meeting in March is March 3rd, to have on their agenda a discussion about this meeting today and the different topics that they would like for the CAB to study. And that way we would have that direction for our next meeting. And then we would also be able to discuss anything in excess of those topics that we would like to study. And that's it for me.
Yeah. So I see Kevin's hand up.
Could we counter with a working board meeting on March 8th instead of the regular scheduled meeting on the 1st?
Oh, I think you misunderstand. What I meant was, so when the board meets, because
Yep.
Commissioner Collins said, is that on the 8th, not the 3rd?
Well, the first meeting in March is the 1st.
Oh, okay, okay. Well,
Could we move this joint meeting, if we're going to try to schedule it today, to the 8th and make it during a working board meeting?
Okay, I'm getting confused here because what I was requesting was not necessarily another joint meeting, although that may be beneficial, but the commissioners didn't, they seemed to indicate that they weren't prepared today to say, yes, I think you should go ahead with this, or you should go ahead with that, or you shouldn't do this. And so I was just going to ask them to cover that in their next board. Well, their next board meeting is tomorrow, so that, would be a little too short notice, but if they would cover their first meeting in March, that would be helpful. And if it's felt that we should have another joint meeting, well, we're certainly open to that.
Kevin, are you suggesting that we convene the Board of Commissioners on the 8th of March specifically to go through the topics that have been suggested and reach some sort of consensus?
Yes, it would not be a joint meeting, but instead of using our regular business meeting, we would have the commissioners review everything on the 8th. That would give staff some time to put a few things together if there was any questions. But To me, this type of discussion lends itself a little bit better to a working board meeting than a business board meeting.
I think that's an excellent suggestion.
What time is that meeting on the 8th?
Tentatively, it's scheduled for 10 o'clock.
Okay.
So I've got a doctor's appointment that day at that'll probably have me out till about 2. So between 11 and 2, I'm not available that day.
So I will have Annette send out a request for dates for that week, either the afternoon of the 8th or maybe move it to Thursday like we did last week. But we'll see what we can get scheduled.
Okay, good. Don McDaniel?
So I'm thinking we've got a lot of information to collate and get back to folks, so you can take a look at what we've been talking about today. So maybe you schedule the meeting after we get the information out to the commissioners and the cab, and make sure you've had enough time to take a look at this stuff. We might very well make it the 8th. Maybe you won't. But maybe you need to take a look at that stuff first.
Yes. Commissioner Tupper.
I'm going to channel Annette here and say, since the 3 commissioners are here, that maybe we look, I'm good on the 10th. Let's see, the 8th, or I mean the 3rd, the first Thursday of that month is PPC. So I'll be in that until noon, 8 till noon with PPC on the 3rd. So the 10th works for me at the moment.
Commissioner Randall, does the 10th work for you?
I've got another appointment in the middle of that day, but that one is easier to be moved. So if that works out better for people, I could reschedule that one. So yes.
And I'm available. I'm available on the 10th, either morning or afternoon.
Yeah, that date works best for me. I have no Annette on the 9th and PPC on the 2nd as well. So depending on time of day, I might slip something in, but the 10th is the best date for me.
Excuse me, the 10th at 10, does that work?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that can work.
All right. Jessica, is there anything else you want to add in terms of what will appear on a future CAB agenda?
I think what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at approving 3 months worth of minutes and discussing further these items that that have come up and where the interest lies, and perhaps starting to put together a little bit of subcommittees on certain things that we know will more than likely continue, given the feedback that we've had from the commissioners today. And that's where I see us going forward on our meeting in March, which will be, okay, let me see. I don't have a calendar in front of me, unfortunately. Is the 10th before or after our meeting? Can you see that, Kevin? Because we meet the 2nd, or is it?
It's before your meeting on the 14th, I think, is the 14th is
Okay.
your normal date, isn't it?
Okay, that's great, because I'll have more information to bring back from that meeting. And the commissioner, and I think it's Commissioner Tupper's up this time around.
I think I'm next man up, yeah, in the rotation.
Yeah, you're up.
Okay.
Commissioner Tupper, your hand is still up.
Sorry, that's an old one.
All right. So seeing no further hands up and having accomplished what we had intended to this afternoon, I will, Jessica, your hand is up.
Yeah, one last quick comment. I can't let this meeting, and without thanking Tom for all of his good work and his good comments. And I mean, he's just keeping us so informed. And I do want to extend my appreciation to Rick Rupp for his participation as well. Thank you.
And I'd like to also add Phil Lusk and Bill County to that list.
Thank you.
So on that note, unless there are objections, I will declare this joint meeting of the Citizen Advisory Board and the Jefferson County PUD Board of Commissioners adjourned. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thanks,
Thanks, Ken.
everyone.